India and Russia, two nations with a history of friendship spanning decades. From the Cold War era to the modern geopolitical landscape, the relationship between these two countries has been a cornerstone of India's foreign policy. But as we dive deeper, a question emerges. Is India too dependent on Russia? What are the hidden costs of this dependence? In this video, we'll uncover the layers of India-Russia relations, exploring the strategic alliances, economic dependencies, and the potential risks involved. Stay with us as we unravel the complexities of this relationship and discuss whether India's reliance on Moscow could be a double-edged sword. To understand the current dynamics, we must first take a journey back in time. The roots of India-Russia relations can be traced back to the early 20th century. During the British colonial period, Russia and India had limited interactions, mostly due to the geographical distance and the British Empire's control over India's foreign policy. However, the relationship began to take shape after India gained independence in 1947. After independence, India found itself in a complex world order dominated by two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. India, under the leadership of Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, chose to adopt a policy of non-alignment, which meant that India would not formally align itself with either the US or the USSR. For those who don't know, aligning with the USSR would have meant India formally siding with the Soviet Union, a powerful bloc of socialist countries led by Russia. This would have guaranteed India military, economic, and political support from the USSR. On the other hand, aligning with the US would have placed India in the capitalist camp, where it could receive significant financial aid, technological assistance, and support from the Western world. However, aligning with either side could have meant that India would be expected to follow their policies and potentially get involved in conflicts that suited their interests. This is why India's choice to adopt a policy of non-alignment was crucial. It allowed the country to maintain its independence and make decisions based on its own national interests, rather than being drawn into the global power struggle between the US and the USSR. However, despite this non-aligned stance, India leaned more towards the Soviet Union for several reasons. The Soviet Union was one of the first countries to offer economic assistance to India. The USSR provided crucial aid for India's industrialization, helping build key infrastructure such as steel plants, power stations, and heavy machinery industries. This assistance was vital for India's growth during its early years as a newly independent nation. In the 1960s, as tensions with China and Pakistan escalated, India turned to the Soviet Union for military support. The 1962 Sino-Indian War and the 1965 Indo-Pakistani War highlighted the need for a strong defense partnership. The USSR became India's primary supplier of military hardware, a relationship that would continue for decades. The Soviet Union consistently supported India on key international issues, including the Kashmir conflict and India's stance on nuclear disarmament. This diplomatic backing was crucial for India as it navigated the complex geopolitical landscape of the Cold War era. One of the most significant milestones in India-Russia relations was the signing of the Treaty of Peace, Friendship, and Cooperation in 1971. This treaty formalized the strategic partnership between the two nations and was a direct response to the changing geopolitical dynamics in South Asia. The treaty had several key provisions. The treaty included a clause for mutual security, which meant that if either country was attacked, the other would provide assistance. This clause was particularly significant during the 1971 Indo-Pakistani War, where the Soviet Union's support was instrumental in India's victory and the creation of Bangladesh. The treaty also emphasized economic cooperation, with both countries agreeing to work together in areas such as trade, science, and technology. This cooperation further deepened the economic ties between India and the Soviet Union. The treaty also promoted cultural exchange, leading to increased people-to-people contact, educational exchanges, and a better understanding of each other's cultures. The 1980s saw a decline in the Soviet Union's global influence, which had a direct impact on its relationship with India. The Soviet economy was struggling, and its ability to provide economic and military support to its allies was diminishing. However, India and the Soviet Union continued to maintain their close ties, even as the world witnessed the eventual collapse of the USSR in 1991. The dissolution of the Soviet Union marked a significant turning point in India-Russia relations. The newly formed Russian Federation faced economic turmoil and political instability, forcing India to adapt to the changing global landscape. However, the strategic partnership between India and Russia remained strong, evolving to meet the demands of the post-Cold War era. The 1990s were a challenging decade for both India and Russia. India was undergoing economic liberalization, opening its markets to the world, while Russia was grappling with the transition from a planned economy to a market-oriented system. Despite these challenges, the two countries continued to engage in strategic and economic cooperation. Russia continued to be India's primary supplier of military hardware, even as India diversified its defense procurement to include other countries like Israel, France, and the United States. The Russian defense industry, struggling with its own economic problems, relied heavily on Indian orders to stay afloat. In the 1990s, energy cooperation emerged as a key pillar of India-Russia relations. Russia, with its vast reserves of oil and natural gas, became a crucial energy partner for India. The two countries signed several agreements to explore and develop energy resources, both in Russia and in third countries. Another significant development was the cooperation in the field of nuclear energy. In 1998, India conducted nuclear tests, leading to international sanctions and condemnation. However, Russia remained supportive of India's nuclear ambitions, and the two countries signed a bilateral agreement for the construction of nuclear reactors in India. The turn of the millennium brought a new phase in India-Russia relations, marked by the formalization of the strategic partnership in 2000 during the visit of Russian President Vladimir Putin to India. This partnership was aimed at deepening cooperation in various fields, including defense, energy, trade, and science and technology. One of the most successful examples of India-Russia defense cooperation is the development of the BrahMos supersonic cruise missile. The BrahMos, named after the Brahmaputra River in India and the Moskva River in Russia, is a symbol of the close military ties between the two countries. The missile is one of the fastest in the world and has been inducted into the Indian Armed Forces. The Sakhalin-1 project in Russia's Far East is another example of successful India-Russia cooperation. India's state-owned Oil and Natural Gas Corporation, ONGC, acquired a stake in the Sakhalin-1 oil and gas project, marking India's entry into Russia's energy sector. This project has been a significant source of oil and gas for India, further cementing the energy ties between the two countries. Despite the strong strategic partnership, trade between India and Russia remained relatively low compared to other major trading partners. However, efforts were made to boost bilateral trade, particularly in sectors such as pharmaceuticals, information technology, and agriculture. The 2010 saw a further deepening of India-Russia relations, with both countries expanding their cooperation in new areas. The strategic partnership was upgraded to a special and privileged strategic partnership, reflecting the importance both nations placed on their relationship. When India decided to purchase the S-400 missile defense system from Russia, it knew it was playing with fire. The United States warned of sanctions under the CAATSA, countering America's adversaries through Sanctions Act. But India went ahead anyway. Why? Because for India, Russian defense technology is not just an option, it's a necessity. Yet, the question remains, is this balancing act sustainable in the long run? What happens if the US decides to tighten the screws? Could India be caught in the crossfire of a new Cold War, with Russia on one side and the West on the other? And let's not forget another pressing issue. If Russia's economy collapses under the weight of sanctions, what happens to all those defense deals? Could India suddenly find itself with a fleet of grounded aircraft and obsolete tanks? India and Russia also collaborated in multilateral forums such as BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization (SCO). These platforms provided both countries with opportunities to coordinate their positions on global issues, particularly in the areas of economic development, security, and counter-terrorism. Space cooperation between India and Russia has a long history, dating back to the launch of India's first satellite, Aryabhata, in 1975 using a Russian launch vehicle. In the 2010s, this cooperation was further strengthened with joint projects, including the development of satellite navigation systems and the potential for manned space missions. As we move into the 2020s, the India-Russia relationship faces new challenges and opportunities. The global geopolitical landscape is shifting, with the rise of China, the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, and increasing tensions between the United States and Russia. These developments have implications for India-Russia relations, and the question of India's dependence on Russia has become more pertinent. One of the most significant areas of India's dependence on Russia is energy. Russia is one of the world's largest producers of oil and natural gas, and India, with its growing energy needs, has increasingly turned to Russia to secure its energy supply. India imports a significant portion of its crude oil from Russia. The Sakhalin 1 and Sakhalin 2 projects have been crucial in meeting India's energy needs. In addition, India has invested in oil and gas fields in Russia, further deepening the energy ties between the two countries. Russia is a key partner in India's civilian nuclear energy program. The Kudankulam nuclear power plant in Tamil Nadu, which was built with Russian assistance, is one of the largest nuclear power plants in India. Russia has also committed to helping India build more nuclear reactors, which will be crucial in meeting India's growing energy demands. Defense is another area where India's dependence on Russia is significant. Despite efforts to diversify its defense procurement, India still relies heavily on Russia for advanced military technology. When we talk about India-Russia relations, there's one area that stands out more than any other: defense. Today, Russia remains India's largest arms supplier, accounting for around 60 to 70% of India's military hardware. From MiG fighter jets and T-90 tanks to the more recent S-400 missile defense systems, Russian equipment is embedded in every branch of the Indian military. India's dependence on Russia extends beyond the procurement of military hardware. The maintenance and servicing of this equipment, as well as the supply of spare parts, are also dependent on Russian cooperation. Any disruption in this supply chain could have serious implications for India's defense preparedness. And now, let's address the elephant in the room: Russia's growing closeness with China and Pakistan. In recent years, as Russia has faced increased isolation from the West, it has turned to new friends, and that includes some of India's biggest adversaries. This isn't just about optics, it's about realpolitik. Russia has conducted joint military exercises with both China and Pakistan, provided advanced weaponry, and even discussed economic corridors that could bypass India altogether. Here's the controversial part: can India still trust Russia as a reliable ally? Or is Moscow hedging its bets in the region, playing both sides to maximize its own strategic advantage? Is this the ultimate betrayal in the making, or just pragmatic diplomacy on Russia's part? The ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine has had significant implications for India-Russia relations. While India has maintained a neutral stance, calling for dialogue and diplomacy, the conflict has raised concerns about the potential impact on India's interests. The conflict has led to fluctuations in global oil prices, which has directly affected India. As one of the largest importers of oil, India is particularly vulnerable to changes in global energy markets. The conflict has also raised concerns about the security of India's investments in Russian energy projects. The Ukraine conflict has also highlighted the risks of India's dependence on Russia for defense supplies. Western sanctions on Russia could potentially disrupt the supply of military hardware and spare parts to India. This has prompted discussions within India about the need to accelerate its defense indigenization efforts and reduce dependence on foreign suppliers. The conflict has also affected the broader geopolitical dynamics, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region. India's strategic interests in the region are closely aligned with those of the United States and its allies, who have been critical of Russia's actions in Ukraine. Balancing its relationship with Russia while maintaining strong ties with the US and other Western countries is a delicate task for India. As we've seen, India's dependence on Russia, particularly in the areas of energy and defense, is significant. However, this dependence comes with risks, particularly in the current global context. So, what can India do to mitigate these risks? One of the key steps India can take is to diversify its energy sources. While Russia will continue to be an important energy partner, India should also explore other options, such as increasing its imports from the Middle East, investing in renewable energy, and enhancing energy cooperation with countries like the United States and Australia. India has already taken steps towards building its own defense industry, but there is a need to accelerate these efforts. Initiatives like the Make in India program, which encourages domestic production of military hardware, are crucial in reducing India's dependence on foreign suppliers. Collaborating with other countries for technology transfer and joint ventures can also help in this regard. Enhancing diplomatic engagement. Balancing its relationship with Russia while maintaining strong ties with the West will require careful diplomatic maneuvering. India should continue to engage with Russia, but also strengthen its partnerships with other countries, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region. Multilateral forums like the Quad, India, the US, Japan, and Australia provide a platform for India to enhance its strategic ties with like-minded countries. India-Russia relations have stood the test of time, evolving from the early days of post-independence to the complex geopolitical landscape of the 21st century. While the strategic partnership between the two nations has brought significant benefits to India, it has also led to a degree of dependence, particularly in the areas of energy and defense. As India navigates the challenges of the current global environment, it is crucial to strike a balance between maintaining its long standing ties with Russia and reducing its vulnerabilities. Diversification of energy sources, strengthening defense indigenization, and enhancing diplomatic engagement with other key players are steps that India must take to ensure its strategic autonomy. The India Russia relationship will continue to be an important pillar of India's foreign policy, but the need for a more balanced and diversified approach is evident. The question remains, can India reduce its dependence on Russia while maintaining a strong and mutually beneficial partnership? Only time will tell. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the India-Russia relationship. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth analyses of global affairs. See you in the next video.